Hey guys, so I want to go over this chain herald explosion setup for the lane hour Deadeye. I'm still sick in this video, so just keep that in mind if I sound off. Yeah, essentially, I got this tech I saw from Don the Crown, and I thought, well, he's using it on a monk, and why can't I just use it on a ranger? And it turns out you can just do the same tech on a ranger and get these insane chain explosions of Herald of Ice and Herald of Thunder. As you can see here, it is quite juicy how much this actually changed. It goes off screens, goes around corners, one shot, you just kill everything around you. It's pretty satisfying and it's pretty good. So yeah, let me go over the setup, how you can do it for your build as well. I've also updated the Moalytics guide down below if you want to see that. So what is this new setup? So it's essentially Herald of Thunder and Herald of Ice chaining off of each other. So essentially the downside of Herald of Thunder is that it cannot shock, and the downside of Herald of Ice, it cannot freeze. But Herald of Ice can shock and Herald of Thunder can freeze. So the idea here is that you're going to make your Herald of Thunder always freeze and you're going to make your Herald of Ice always shock. This is why in that Herald of Thunder setup, we have cold infusion, which makes you do a 50% less lightning damage, but you get as extra cold damage on your Herald of Thunder because you want this to freeze. We also have Glaciation here, right? And Herald of Ice, we have lightning infusion. So essentially we're trying to swap the elements here. We're trying to make our Herald of Ice pure land damage. We're trying to make our Herald of Thunder pure cold damage. In attempts to essentially make Herald of Thunder always freeze and make Herald of Ice always shock. So they constantly chain off each other. In theory, this is a constant chain and it will forever keep going as long as there's monsters it can keep hidden. So there's no limit to this, which is why it's extremely strong, and it's why sometimes you can get massive like 2 screens of explosions going off on each other. It's quite insane. It's so insane actually that I dropped my cast on freeze setup because it's just not needed anymore. The clear speed is way better than it was before. So yeah, this build has got even better. So one thing to note though is that because you are using stuff like cold infusion and glaciation on your Herald of Thunder, this does mean you can't use it on light arrow. This means your build has to have enough cold damage at a base value to actually make this work. Usually what this includes is having a Against the Darkness with damage extra cold damage, or going into the starting area for monk and grabbing stuff like Essence of the Mountain with the freeze build up. You need a freeze build up and cold damage to make this build work, because you cannot use cold infusion on your light arrow or glaciation on your light arrow, which is what I recommended to actually, freeze stuff. So do keep that in mind. You probably can't play this straight off into maps. You probably have to have some sort of amount of gear, maybe some flat cold damage on your rings, quiver, a bow. You don't need on all the pieces. Like I said, I can't say how much you actually need. Just keep in mind, you do need enough cold damage and freeze build up to actually make this work. Yeah, that's essentially the TLDR of the setup, how it's going to work. You're just making a Herald of Thunder freeze, you're making a Herald of Ice shock, and they just keep chaining off each other consistently. Something to note is that this I'm anointing right here, Doomsayer, increased AoE, it's very nice. I'm anointing it currently. You can also grab these AoE notes and they are optional. And as a side note, I did fully update the Moalytics guide, the tank setup, the Uber endgame setup, and the MF endgame. The endgame and starter versions don't have this tech because I don't think these setups will have enough cold damage at the start to actually make this work. Definitely not the starter setup. Maybe the endgame setup, if you have enough gear, you can definitely do this. But yeah, check out one of these setups. The tank setup is definitely the easiest one to do this because the tank setup actually goes to the monk starting area and you get an Essence of the Mountain and Essence of the Storm, so increased chance to shock and increased chance to freeze build up would massively help this sort of like build, because you do need that freeze build up. Yeah, do check out the Moalytics guide. They're both updated with the new skill gems now, some of their descriptions as well. I think that's mostly about it about this setup. You're still playing the exact same build as before. You can now just drop cast on freeze. You don't really need cast on freeze anymore, so you can just permanently have cast on shock on or do other things, and your clear just becomes way better than that before. The chain heralds are absolutely insane, especially if you heavily invest into the AoE nodes as well, but it's not needed. But anyway, that's about it. If you have any questions, feel free to comment below.